For many of us, we got a couple of standards that a game has to meet before we can consider it awesome. I would consider a beautiful setting to be pretty important, but not necessarily crucial. And then a great story is crucial to me. But the most important part is gotta be the gameplay and how fun the mechanics of the game are. Ghostwire Tokyo has got a lot going for it, but let's find out exactly how it holds up, especially in terms of the gameplay. So first, how is the game set up? The game has a pretty great story and setup that'll hook you, and it's pretty interesting. It's set in Shibuya, and it stars a young man called Akido. He gets into a car crash just minutes before the entire ward is taken over by visitors. These evil spirits attack all of the people in Shibuya and rip their spirits from their bodies. But because Akido is critically injured, this allows a ghost called KK to jump into his body. It's also enough to keep Akido joined to his own body, and it also gives him some magical powers for attack, defense, and also radar. These two join forces and try to save Shibuya and some of the spirits that are still floating around. It might sound really wild, but it's a good opening to the game, and it'll keep you engaged and wondering what's going to happen next. Well, at least it did for me. Next, the scare factor. Might sound like this game's packed with a lot of creep factors and is very scary, and yes, there are definitely elements of that, but it's not a horror game. It fits more into exploration game genre. It's an open world game, one that also has some horror and action elements to it. There are moments in the game that can be really scary and creepy. For example, during the close combat moments where things are more closed in. But overall, it doesn't feel like a scary game. And then because you don't really expect it at the moments that are scary, it kind of catches you unaware, and it makes it even scarier, but only in that moment because you didn't see them coming. Keeps you on your toes, and I really enjoy that aspect of the game. How does the setting of the game look? This is one of the best aspects of any game, particularly in this one, in my opinion. I love the setting, and the graphics are just stunning. It's an urban setting and a claustrophobic streets that it just looks like a real modern metropolis. It has a setting that should be filled with people, and the fact that it's mostly abandoned plays into the game's backstory, and it makes it feel so eerie. Not scary, but eerie. It helps you get into the mindset of characters that you're playing. It's beautiful, but also pretty sad, since the people who are ripped from their lives are gone, but all of their belongings are just left behind. Everywhere you see people's stuff lying around, waiting for them to come back to it. There are clothing and shoes as their owners have disappeared, phones lying exactly where they were dropped, and people were taken away. Some of the saddest things that you could spot are like a baby carriage that you can see without the baby inside. And the thing that really hits me the hardest was the sad pups that are lying with their owner's belongings, left behind to fend for themselves. But a great factor in the gameplay is that you can use some of your money to buy food for the animals that have been left behind. It's small attention to detail, but I love it. Next, we got the plot holes. The story's great, but there's a massive plot hole where KK and Akido save the people's lives. They collect their souls in little paper dolls, and the off-screen, the idea is that they're going to turn them into someone else via a hidden transmission in a phone booth. But they never explain how they'll save them since they don't actually have their bodies anymore. It isn't great, but since the rest of the story works, we'll let this one slide. No big deal. The gameplay with the map. As an open world game, Ghostwire Tokyo is a map game that forces you to explore the map for long periods of time. You're going to have to look for certain collectibles and do side quests before you can go back to fighting the enemies. You have to clear the fog before you're able to play the game, and it can become boring when you have to explore the map and find the right number of collectibles, for example souls, before you can continue on with the game. It isn't flexible and fun enough to make the open world exploration engaging and something that you just really want to keep on doing. You're forced to do it and complete it and all of that to get to the next step. And honestly, I just had to groan a few times when I was back to the step of exploring the map. It just, nah. This part of the gameplay wasn't difficult for me, but again, boring. Are you a fan of open world exploration games? Which elements do you feel like make a game really great? So what are some of your favorite games in this category? Let us know in the comment section below, because we love to hear all your thoughts. Next up, we're going to check on the climbing mechanisms and the attack modes and see how those gameplay methods measure up to some of the best parts of the game. How do the platforming and climbing mechanisms work? This game is full of moments where you need to get on top of buildings, for example, to get collectibles like souls. And you can't just ignore it either. You have to get it done before they'll let you move forward to the next section. There's no getting past the need to get on top of things, but in some other games, climbing and exploring is just one of the most fun parts of gameplay. And since this game has so much of this aspect, one would expect them to make it really fun. But sadly, in this case, you'd be completely wrong. The climbing and the platforming in this game is just really hard, and the mechanisms don't work that well. In fact, some of the gamers who have played this game have said that the mechanism is one of the worst that they've seen for this kind of thing. And that's saying a lot, because we've seen some pretty bad ones. Some pretty bad ones. They do have an option of spanning a tengu as a personal grappling point point that allows you to travel up quickly, but you don't get that skill very easily, and even when you do get the option, it's really expensive to get. But besides that, there aren't really many options for vertical movement, and you'll probably lose a lot of time just struggling to get up things. The fog. Another part of gameplay I really didn't enjoy was the fog that covers many different areas that you haven't cleared yet. For most games, the fog would lift as you explore the game, but not in this one. You can't move in the surroundings that are covered in fog until you've cleared it. Normally, you visit a landmark or a checkpoint, and then the fog lifts and you can continue exploring the rest of the area. But in this case, Akito has to go to the Torii Gates and then cleanse the area. And only after you've cleansed it, then you can move around into the area and on the map. Again, it doesn't give you a lot of freedom in the gameplay. It's a step that you absolutely have to do before you can get anything else done, though. At this stage, you start feeling like you've got a list of chores to do between very small pieces where you're actually playing like a video game. The attack mode. Just another gameplay element that fails to deliver is during the battle mode. Akito has magical powers that allows him to use fire, wind, and water to attack. In theory, these attack modes are very different from each other, and you'll need to use them in different situations tactically. For example, if you're attacking short range, then you'd use a water attack for that. But in reality, they aren't very different from each other. And for most of the enemies, you can just use whichever one is activated at the time. It doesn't really matter. You need spiritual bullets to work these powers, and that means that you can just use the same one until it runs out of those bullets. Then you can switch to another one and rinse and repeat. It almost makes no effort or difference when you use each power. To attack stronger enemies, the theory is that you can charge your attack to inflict more damage, but you can obtain the same effect by just repeatedly smashing the button. It needs to scale more. You're also supposed to have some sort of strategy, but in real gameplay, you just end up hitting the attack button and praying that it all works out. And it normally does. Ghostwire Tokyo isn't terrible, it's not a bad game, but it definitely has some frustrating gameplay mechanics. The graphics and the story are so good, but they really let us down with how you actually play the game. It starts to get a little annoying and repetitive, even frustrating at the moments. Again, though, mostly it works. Have you played Ghostwire Tokyo? Let us know your thoughts in the game, and I thank you very much for watching.